have you here. So today's webinar is really going to be very, very informative. There'll be a session where, of course, you can drop your questions. You don't have to wait to the question time. You can drop your question and we'll do our best to respond to your questions. We have an amazing speaker list that would be giving us a very, very interesting deep lecture on the industry report, and this is really going to be exciting. It's really going to be exciting. So I'm going to introduce our speakers. I'm going to read their bio, but not currently, but I'm going to read their bio. And this session, of course, we have guests coming in from all over Africa and, of course, outside Africa. So feel free, like I said, to drop your messages on the chat box, introduce yourself, say hello, where you're chatting us, where you're joining us from. I'm seeing Lagos, Nigeria. So hi. So yeah, you're free to just drop your location, and it's a pleasure to meet you, Fatima. Oh, it's a pleasure to meet you, Rasa. This is beautiful. It's a pleasure to meet you, Abdul, Hamid. I'm seeing your messages. You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, so to get started, we would so just a moment. Yeah, so of course, we will start with a brief introduction about our organization. The Association of Language Companies in Africa is a professional association dedicated to empowering and expanding the language service sector across the continent. Our mission is to promote the growth of language services companies in Africa and facilitate knowledge sharing and best practices across the continent. Our vision is to contribute towards building a resilient and thriving language services sector in Africa, recognized globally for its quality, innovation, and impact. So, of course, we have members across 4 continents, and we were founded in August 2023. An amazing, we have had an amazing journey so far. And yeah, I would, of course, we have seen most of our posts on social media. We have an annual conference that would be coming up August 2026. We are super excited about this conference. So it's coming up August 27 to 28, 2026 at Accra, Ghana. So we'll be live there at Accra, Ghana. And our team is very, very necessary, especially at this age of AI. So turning change into growth in the age of automation. And of course, we'll be having panel session, talks, workshop, fireside chat, tech showcases. Sorry, was someone speaking? Okay, right. So yeah, so this is the 3rd annual gathering of African Language Services Community. And yeah, so it's a continent premier platform for practitioners. This is going to be the 3rd gathering. We've had the virtual, we've had the one in Cape Town, and now we are going to Accra, Ghana, an amazing conference. So we currently are, of course, we have an open slot for speakers. So just in case you want to, of course, be one of our speakers, we are still accepting applications. Of course, your emails will be sending you the emails for the forms so that you can fill the form if you are interested, and we'll do our best to get back to you as soon as possible. So we're looking for speakers in automation, AI, machine translation, governance and language policy, professional development standards, African language, NLP and tech, business growth, and cross-border operations. Of course, we are we are very open to getting as many applications as possible. And for the annual conference coming up in August, mind you, we're in June, so August is just a few months away. We are, of course, still accepting sponsorship, and we'll still send you, of course, the emails that would respond to. We'll send you the email so that you can have our emails and send any requests that you have in case you want to be a sponsor. Okay, so if you have any question about any of the announcements that I've shared about ALCA, about our mission, our vision, our coming up conferences, being a speaker and sponsors, please, we are more than happy to respond to your emails or even drop a chat on this webinar. Okay, so I am very much excited to introduce our report today. The report has been amazing. I've gone through the report, and all I can say is well done to the amazing researchers. African language is expanding. We have, of course, we know we have 2,000 African languages, but data is something that I am very much interested in, and this report shines light on that. This report was commissioned by ALCA and is the first Pan-African industry report. If you've been in the language industry for so long, you would know that we have little or no data about African languages, which is really frustrating. And this is one of the things that we are here to, or that this is the main crux of why we are here to talk about this industry report. We should have more of this, but I'm glad that we are starting with this report. And of course, in this report, 18 countries were represented in this report, and we had more than 100 practitioners surveyed for this report. So this report is not just rich, but it can also be referenced. And after this webinar, we'll be sharing the report. We welcome your questions, we welcome your feedback, we welcome your support, your collaboration to ensure that this report gets into as many hands as possible. Because of course, our aim is to have a comprehensive data-driven analysis of African languages published in different publications, and of course being referenced as much as possible. So, okay, so I am super excited about what we have planned, and I cannot wait to get started. If you're still with me, can I have emojis? Can I have you just, just show me emojis? Yes, Fatima, thank you. Yeah, thank you. All right. Yeah, so are you ready to meet our speakers? I know I am ready to listen to them. I'm very excited about this, as you can see. Okay, so I would start with our first speaker. Okay, I'm going to start reading from the bio. Rather, read the bio of our first speaker. Oumi is a research and strategy professional with over 2 decades of experience spanning language services, market research, and academic mentorship. Holding degrees from the University of Botswana, she did her BSc and MBA, and in the University of Derby, where she did her MSc. Oumi has conducted market and environmental research in Botswana and the wider SADC region, which also guiding master's level students across diverse fields for more than 16 years. Currently serving as the head of operations and strategy at Thoughts in Motion, Oumi brings 9 years of expertise in managing language experts and 19 years in conference and events planning within the language service sector. So please, let's just use the emoji and just give a round of applause to Oumi. Should be speaking with us. Yeah. So I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Kristen Elongue. I hope I did not murder your name, Kristen. He's the Managing Director of Cardboard Localization Services with 11 years as an interpreter in the tech, non-profit, and education sectors. He founded the Network of African Languages Translators and Teachers, ALCA, and the Marketplace of African Translators and Interpreters, MATI, both about 5,414 translators, interpreters, linguists from Africa. He's a co-founder and board member of the Association of Language Companies in Africa, ALCA, and hosts the podcast Spotlighting Language Technology Initiatives in Africa. In 2024, he was in multilingual list of 34 global influencers driving the language service industry. In September 2024, he launched the Afrolinguals magazine and the Next Billion Conference. He's actively working towards increasing awareness of the economic potential of the language investments like fintech, agritech, etc. He's a member of the ALCA, Institute of Translation and Interpreting, Chartered Institute of Linguists, ILA, and ATSA. So without much further ado, please, let's just welcome Kristen. And of course, let's use the same emoji and just give him a round of applause. It's our pleasure to have you here. Okay, so are we ready? Like I said, today's session is really going to be very informative. And so one thing that I'm very sure you're going to get out of today's conversation is you're going to understand where the African language sector has been, and of course, the future. The future is very, very important, what we are currently doing, and of course, what the future holds for African languages. So I will throw our first question to Oumi. Hi, Oumi. Oumi, please.
I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Great. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you. Okay, so I'm going to show our first question to Oumi, and the first question would be: the AFCFTA represents the largest free trade zone in the world by participating countries. I think I should stop sharing my screen. I don't know if that's okay. Okay. Here, I'll come back to that. But for now, let's just okay. So after it represents the largest free trade zone in the world by participating nations, yet language strategy remains absent from most market entry conversations. What will it take for business leadership across the continent to recognize language as infrastructure?
Well, to begin with, when you are talking about an infrastructure, you're talking about something that is absolutely mandatory for the success of the business. And for the African continent, we have those 54 countries, more than 2,500 languages, but then we operate on 5 or 6 colonial languages across the entire continent. And because a lot of those colonial languages are spoken across the world, it doesn't seem to be too much of a problem for businesses to trade across. So what we need to do is we would have to have either regulation making the language an absolute necessity like they do in China. If you want to trade with the Chinese, you have to make sure that absolutely all of your correspondence and labeling, for example, for products are written in the Chinese languages and they are culturally compliant to the area where you want to do the trade. So we would have to have regulation across the continent to meet, to have the same exact requirements. And then once you have put that regulation in place, you then have to make it automated across your business, which is to say that you don't want to have to keep reproducing the correspondence. It's like you have to create in your infrastructure certain pieces of common communication just to be sort of relevant and applicable across all of your marketing and communication. The next thing you'd have to do is you'd have to make it accessible and not too expensive to use, or in some cases, you'd have to make it expensive not to use it. So in some countries, if you are trying to sell your product and you have not translated your core material into the local lingo, you could be penalized for not adopting. So we're back to, can we create regulations that necessitate the use of local lingo or the language into the space, so that we ensure that when you come in, all of those local businesses are definitely being adopted, are being approached to, to use that language or to use a translation service in order to make your business profitable in that space.
Really, really, really on point. Really, really on point. Okay, so Kristen, you with us, right? Hello, Kristen.
Hello, Ba. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yeah. Yes, I can.
Yes, I can. Okay.
Okay. So the question is regulatory across African markets create compliance risks and limits cross-border scalability. How do you price that risk? And what would be more harmonized regulatory requirements in terms of market size?
Okay, thank you. And thank you also for ALCA for putting this event. Yes, so as you indicated, there is a lot of regulatory fragmentation that can be observed across various African markets, especially at the level of compliance. And all of this highly limit, cross-border scalability. You realize that even at the level of business that is being done in African languages, not all of them are standardized, not all of them are being enforced. I know that when you go to East African market, the use of the Swahili language is more pronounced and more enforced. In Rwanda also, there are regulations that kind of compel the need to use Kinyarwanda when engaging in some areas of business. But that's not the case in some other African country. If I take the case of Ghana, where we are currently being based, it's quite possible to do business in Ghana completely in English without ever needing to move to the local languages. And I think, as Oumi indicated, there are policies in China that enforce, the use of local languages, but that's not that much the case in Africa. And almost every country has its own policy. So the AFCTA is a powerful tool that could be leveraged, in order to have a regional or a continental policy that will allow businesses and, trade to be done through the languages of the continent. And when we are saying languages of the continent here, it's not to exclude, foreign international languages, but to prioritize the local languages, because business is one of the key tools through which languages are being developed, is the key tool through which language service is being, expanded or growing, so there is a huge industry that can be not just created, but, solidified if more and more businesses are leveraging on local languages. For example, just imagine a scenario where any foreign company that expands to Africa has to ensure that their resources, their policies, their practices, integrate the local languages of the country. Automatically, it's going to create new jobs, not just for translators, but for people who are speaking the language. It's going to create a greater incentive for even the nationals to learn the language. Because what we observe currently in Africa is a scenario where people find more value in learning foreign languages than in learning the local languages. And there are more and more parents pushing their children to learn languages like Chinese or English, why? Because they know that it comes with greater economic, access, greater economic opportunities, either for scholarship or for attending foreign institutions, especially universities. But imagine a case where anyone coming to Africa must use African languages. Automatically, anyone will have more teachers teaching those languages, will have more technology, terminology development will advance, because as the language is being used more and more frequently, the terminology, the vocabulary, the glossary, they practice, expand or accelerate the development of those languages. And there are more jobs that will be created. In Ghana, they have what they call Ghana Wood, which is a similarity to Nollywood in Nigeria. where they basically do subtitling, you know, and cover up of movie that are produced in India, you know, but in Ghanaian language. There's an economy that has been developed through it. Now imagine that, you know, the local languages are being enforced, you know, across Africa, and we have similar system. There are billions, you know, of billions of dollars that are going to be generated through that, both for the voiceover artists, you know, the translators, the interpreters, you know, the nationals of the country, and many, many other opportunities. But this can only happen if the way we approach language is being reviewed, is being changed to see language not just as a tool, you know, for communication, but a tool for expression, a tool of living. Yeah, thank you.
Well said. Well said, Kristen. Just to address on the question, specific questions, feel free to drop them in the chat box. We are taking notes of the questions coming in. So yeah, back to you, Oumi. Pan-African expansion is the stated ambition for most serious players in this space, but ambition and architectures are different things entirely, right? And what does a genuinely scalable cross-border language business require that most practitioners are not building?
Well, when you look at the report, you will find that a lot of our respondents were not businesses. They were individuals who have just registered their businesses, so they're like sole proprietors, or a lot of them had just started out. Most of them were just language professionals, right? And when you look at business as a whole, we tend to always just look at the basics. Register your business, register your tax, you know, get your product in order and all sorts. There's a whole other part of the business that, you know, sort of the business science that we tend to overlook, which is how exactly does your product go from you to your market, right? And that is all of your processes, all of your, steps to market, essentially, right? So when you have a product like a language service, first of all, you have to know what is the product that you're offering. If you're offering translation, are you offering interpretation? And in which field? Are you going to go general, or are you going to be very specific in how in topic specific, for example? Are you going to be, if you're in legal, are you going to be just doing legal stuff, or are you going to be doing IP and patent law, right? All of those are specializations. Once you know what your product is and you packaged it, then you have to say, okay, which market am I going to service? And then usually we'll start at home. Okay, so I'm in Botswana, we're going to start in Botswana. Now we're like, okay, so this product that I offer in Botswana, I can scale it. But in order for me to be able to scale it, we now have to look at our entire, where else is this product being requested? Usually you will find out from the inquiries that come in that are not in your direct market. So if you have established a good website or some sort of a client engagement machine, like a funneling procedure, you will find those outliers, who's calling in and from where, right? That's the first thing. Let's say our inquiries are now coming in from the East African market, the West African market, every once in a while, the North African market. You now have to start looking at what are the requirements of getting into those markets, right? And this is where our fragmentation comes into place. What are the laws in terms of setting up a business? What are the laws in terms of being able to operate in those markets? What are the tax requirements? That stuff, the stuff that makes business, and the reason why you hire an administrator, an attorney, an accountant, and all of that, that comes into play. So now, how you operate into those markets, how are you going to pay those taxes? How are you going to send your funds, for foreign exchange purposes and so on and so forth? You have to create some sort of a mechanism as a business when you start that allows you to immediately adopt into new markets. And in order for you to be able to do that, you have to be worldly in how you set up your business. So even though a lot of our guys, our respondents were so props, they do work internationally as it is, right? A lot of them leave their countries to go and, to provide a service, Egypt and Ghana. Some of them travel from East Africa to South Africa. I've actually moved people from Saudi Arabia to Cameroon just to provide Arabic interpretation. So for somebody with that kind of a worldly experience, they have to know what is the procedure if I was to set up my company in that country. So immediately you sit down with your team. So you're going to sit down with your marketing team. You're going to sit down with your accounting team. You're going to sit down with the legal team. And you're going to say, tell me about the policies and procedures in all of these countries. And then you're going to make sure that how your processes work in country A. So in Botswana, this is how we quote, this is how we price, this is blah, blah, blah. And then you're going to cost and immediately adopt that procedure for those countries that you want to target and other countries that you're not even thinking about. Let's say you're like, okay, right now I'm thinking about Africa and I want to expand, but let's assume BRICS comes to me and I need to provide services in India and Brazil. You want to look into all those countries to see what their procedures are, right? And then you will be able to provide services. You'll be able to immediately adopt all of your procedures so that you are legally compliant in those different markets. So what we as business people have to do is we have to understand fundamentally that the business itself is just to provide that solution, but the background of how that solution gets to your client, that's the architecture that we all have to systematically work on and make sure that we are able to, we're compliant and that we're able to export our services into other countries. Because I was recently attending, I've recently attended a couple of conferences or rather workshops, masterclasses on how to do business in different countries. And I stopped at Europe, right? Because I was like, okay, some of our services are European, our clients are in Europe. The first thing you have to look at is what are the laws on IP, privacy laws, sharing of information, and how could you be penalized if you were to break those laws? We are cognizant of that. We're like, okay, we don't know if we're ready to touch that market because the bill is a bit high. Then it's taxes. If I want to provide a service even remotely in Europe, I'm in Botswana, I'm providing online interpretation in Europe. In order for me to build a client, I have to be tax compliant there. So I have to be VAT registered in Botswana and then I have to be VAT registered in Europe. We don't know this. We just think, okay, I'm going to go and provide my service and I'm going to send a bill and then get paid. And then it turns out that when you send the bill, the European taxman will call the Botswana taxman and say, there's a company in Botswana that has been providing services to a company here, and they didn't pay our VAT when they received their payment. And suddenly you are broken so many international laws. So what we have to do is we have to look at business, not just on the front end, meeting the client and providing a service. We have to look at the back end. What are the legal compliance requirements? What are the, what do you call this? What do you need? What papers do I have to sign? What forms do I have to fill? What do I have to have ready? And what information is common so that I have it already present in order for me to be able to provide. And another thing is you should also have probably a local presence. A lot of countries require you to have a local presence. Can you just have a satellite office or some sort of a representative in that country that people can talk to and say, okay, you're here, we can find you, so that when we build and we're trying to follow up on you, here you are. So if the moment you think, I need to go global, I need to go outside of my market, these are the considerations you have to take as a business.
Well said, Oumi. Well said. I truly hope we are taking down points because I am taking down points as well. Okay, so over to you, Kristen. There are thousands of language professionals across Africa, and I'm sure doing the research, of course, you spoke to, you did this research, you and Oumi, and but they're doing serious work that nobody outside their immediate network knows about. I mean, everyone wants people to appreciate their work. So why is it so hard for this industry to be seen? And what can someone just starting out do to not disappear into this noise? Your mic is muted, just in case.
Okay. Yes, sorry. So you say, why is it so hard for language professional to be seen?
Yeah. And what can
Is it the
someone
question?
starting out?
And what can someone starting out
Okay.
Yeah, do not
do not
disappear.
disappear?
Okay. Okay. So starting with the first one, why is it so hard for language professionals to be seen? I think they are seen, but just that they are not valued appropriately. It's not actually that hard to find a translator or an interpreter who is based in Africa. You just go on LinkedIn. You notice that many language company, whenever they put a request for translator or linguist, they will get a lot of share, a lot of responses and all of that. So in terms of visibility and access to talent, they are not really a major barrier. The issue is usually after you have been selected, the price that will be offered for the work that needs to be done is not worthy of the effort that will be put in, especially if you are coming as a language professional. And one of the peculiarity, as the ALCA report clearly highlighted, is that the language industry compared to other industry is a very peculiar one where there are almost no barrier to entry. So for example, to be a medical doctor, you may have to do 7 years training and have a license before you start operating. To operate in the banking industry, you will need a license. And many other industries kind of have some regulatory, framework or system that kind of create credibility for practitioners. But in the language industry, we really do not have that, which means that someone who is just ending with his first class or his graduate study or his bachelor degree can claim to be a professional translator. So when opportunities are out there, many will jump on it, but the quality of the work that is being done is not up to standard, So considering that first aspect, I think they are visible, they are accessible, and through the platforms that we, by the grace of God, coordinate, like the marketplace of African translators and interpreters, people are able to share job opportunities for translators, interpreters, linguists quite easily. On LinkedIn, also on Twitter, I think almost different platforms, it's quite easy, but it's about the compensation that comes with it. Now, the second aspect of the question, what can a translator, interpreter, a language professional in general do to be visible and to stand out, especially in this age of AI dominance? I think number one, it's important to have a vision. What do you expect from your investment or involvement in the language industry? There's a saying that for lack of vision, my people perish. So if you do not clearly know where you are going, you will not easily be able to get there. So there are many who are in the industry, but they are not, let me say, they are not serious. Like they are touching different things. They are doing translation. They are also having a full-time job here. They are doing different things. And because of that, they will not be able to put the work that is needed to build a brand, because building a brand takes time, but the effort that needs to be invested into the process can only be done effectively and consistently when you have a clear vision. In this regard, there is one that I really admire, Dr. Njomo, who decided to focus on the language industry as a language consultant, a translator consistently. And more than translating, he's also teaching, he's also, advising. Like when you look at his profile, you can clearly see that he is truly specialized. And that's the second aspect. So after having a clear vision of being committed to the industry, you need to have a specialty. The era of generalization is over. People who claim medical sector, I am in. Health sector, I am in. Legal translation, I am in. That era is dead. What many companies are looking forward now are language specialists, to review what AI output has already, kind of facilitated. And that's the reason why machine translation, post-editing is quite trending now more than ever. So if you're not specialized, if people do not know you for standing in one specific niche, it will be difficult for people to come to you. So, but specialization also is an intentional choice which require consistency. A third element after being specialized is to strategically position yourself. There are platforms you cannot afford not to be present on. Some of them, one of the first which I know is LinkedIn. LinkedIn today is even more beneficial than industry platform like Pros, because Pros, some may go there, but not many know the platforms. But almost everybody, when they have a need, they will automatically think of spreading the information via LinkedIn. So you must be on LinkedIn. You must understand how LinkedIn works. You must be actively sharing your work, sharing your experiences, telling your story, being a storyteller, right? And not just a ghost on LinkedIn, just watching content and not engaging, so strategically positioning ourselves on visible platform like LinkedIn, Pros, the Network of African Language and Translators, which is also a LinkedIn group. A lot of people are getting opportunities through it. The WhatsApp group, Marketplace for African Translator Interpreters, and other platform, translation, directory, and all of that. And if you are a language company, you must be part of ALCA. ALCA, the Association of Language Company in Africa, is a unique way for you as a language company to position yourself as someone serious, as someone professional, and through it have access to more market opportunities, have access to more professional development opportunities, have access to more insight, and knowledge that will enable you to offer services that are more professional. And that's the fourth element, the professionalization, right? We have a lot of amateur. The report that we produce indicated that averagely, just 75% of the businesses that act as language company are formally registered, like formally having all their requirements in place, which means that there is a quarter of the language company who are operating without necessarily having a license. And for those who mostly participated in the survey, they are freelancers. And among freelancers, majority do not have any like legal, entity or body under which they operate, But by being part of platforms like ALCA, you increase your visibility, your professionalism, and many other things. So those are the few things which I believe could be considered. Basically, having a clear vision of your career in the industry, having an understanding of, social media marketing. Number 3, being specialized in a niche. And number 4, investing in your professional development as it will reflect in how you practice, how you position yourself, and how you price your services. Thank you.
Well said, Kristen.
Well said, Kristen.
So just to emphasize, we are still taking questions, and I am seeing some interest works just for people that want to be members of ALCA. The link is in the chat box. So, of course, we're still going to post it again just in case you just joined in and you're not able to access the link to be a member. So, exciting conversation. And so you'll be taking the next question, effects that AI would have on this industry for people building careers. What does that mean for the work they offer? and the work that they cannot afford to outsource to a machine. What does that mean? And from the question, then of course you can go into dissecting more about the reports and of course what the report is for, and dive down into the data of the reports. So over to you, Oumi.
Where is it up? Hi. Okay. When it comes to AI, I feel like the problem with it is that we just don't understand what it is, what it does, how to use it, how to apply it. And I know this for a fact because I'm always on LinkedIn, and just earlier this year, Forbes had published a list of about 30 people who become multimillionaires and billionaires using AI. That just tells me that this is a tool that has become available that people can use, and we don't understand it enough for us to really properly apply it. It's like, you know what, here is a shovel, and we only know how to dig with our hands. That's basically where we are, okay, in terms of the understanding. Now, what we need to do, first of all, is gain an understanding of exactly what can AI do for you. One of the things is, if you yourself could literally create your own language platform using AI, because you can ask it, can you create code for me? And then when you came after creating the code, can you tell me how to do the research so that I can feed it the information I require to make my own language platform, right? So we literally have, we don't understand exactly how to do that, but we know that it is there. And it is something that we can definitely apply. AI is not taking away from anybody's actual work or their ability to make money, because like I started, 30 odd people became billionaires just this year. In the last 6 months, there's a guy who is currently on his own running a 300-man business where absolutely every individual is an AI bot he created, and has made more than $100 million US by himself using AI. Okay, so now let's take that. That is our background, that is our foundation. What do we do? First of all, in the language space, even though AI helps to make the work happen faster, it has not reached human the human equivalent of speech. It really hasn't. That's why we have the ISO for machine post-editing translation, which is use the AI to speed up your work, but read it still. You still have to read it. You still have to go over it. You still have to make sure that it doesn't use typical AI terms. It doesn't sound like a machine did the job. You still have to put a human after the machine has done it. So what has it done for you? It has just said, okay, it takes me, it takes me 10 days to do a 100-page document, but with the AI, it's going to do it in 3 days, and then the other 2 days, I'm just editing it, which means that I can do 200 pages in the same 10 days and earn double the amount. That's what it's supposed, that's what it means, that's what it's doing for us, right? We just have to learn how to do that. That's all we have to do. We just have to learn how to do that. Now, when it comes to the things that the AI cannot do, it's an opportunity. You see what I mean? When there is a problem, so the whole point of business is offering solutions, and then people pay you money for it. So if there is an opportunity that, where an AI or another individual cannot solve, that's an opportunity for you who can solve it to come in and capitalize on that gap. And then once you've capitalized on that gap and you've created automations means this is how I follow the procedure to reach the end. And once you've created this procedure to reach the end, you can literally create code to go back to your AI and say, okay, this is how I process this information. This is how I copy and paste it across all of my documents. And then the AI will say, okay, sharp. Then it does the thing, it writes the code, and then it executes it for you. And then you're like, okay, now every time I have to issue whatever it is that I'm doing, I just press these 5 buttons. The AI does it for me quickly. I can now focus on improving on the product that I'm offering. So if your product is I now provide translations in a language that only 200 people speak, that doctors need help with. It means you're kind of focusing on improving that service, but the AI is doing everything else. The AI is finding all the people that want that language. The AI is posting automatically on all of your social media. The AI is updating all of your financial information. It's creating your invoices. It's following up with the clients. You know, that's what it's doing for you. We just have to learn as a people how to use the tool. We just don't know how to use the tool. That's all it is. And once we learn how to use the tool, you know, the world really does become your oyster. We start to make billionaires out of Africans, to be honest. You know, that's what it's going to do for us, you see? So it's not really a problem. Our problem, though, in Africa, when it comes to AI, is our access to internet, our access to tools, computers, our knowledge on how to just type, our knowledge on, can we have access to more, you know, can we be mobile in terms of our phone? Can I go to the village where I raise my chickens, but then during the day when it's, you know, high heat, I'm sitting inside, I'm working on my AI, I'm providing the translations, and I'm doing interpretation? That's our problem. Our problem is automation. Our problem is the infrastructure to provide and use those tools. That's where our problem is, you know? So we have to fill that gap in order for us to be able to compete globally. But we're not, the AI is not a problem, it's a tool. We just don't know how to use it.
I totally agree with your viewpoints. I totally agree. And I believe that AI is really going to create more opportunities if properly used. And so, yeah, so we are going to, do we have, first of all, before our speakers dive deeper into our reports, yeah, we want you to ask questions. I know we've had incredible people posting their questions on the chat box, but I'm going to give opportunity to two persons to, you know, have the floor to actually ask their questions. And I'm sure our speakers are more than ready to answer them. So do we have anyone? Anyone is speaking, your mic is actually switched off. Okay, all right. So maybe keep thinking of your questions and you can share that later. So yeah, Oumi and Kristen, you would, the next session will be just you going through the report, telling us what this report was meant to answer, the roadblocks, the success, the breakthroughs you discovered from this report, the future of what comes next after this report, and most especially the data that this reports either proved or challenged, so we want to know more about this report. So over to you, Kristen.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ba, for sharing. So I think there is a lot of insight that anyone who grasps the report will be able to get and to understand more about the dynamics on the African market and the profile of language company, their level of maturity, and the regulatory environment. But I would like to share 7 key elements that anybody should know. Number one, when we did the research, the first thing we realized is that the African language industry ecosystem is growing faster than we had thought. You know, for example, we noticed that 50%, you know, of the respondents had at least, you know, 5 years experience. We had 95.7% who were already planning expanding into new markets. And we also realized that the sector is gradually moving from an informal market towards a more professionalized industry. And this is visible at the level of ALCA by the increasing interest, you know, in people joining the association. A second key insight that we got was that many African language professionals are embracing AI, not resisting it. But again, as Oumi was indicated, even though there is an enthusiasm towards AI. There is a need to effectively leverage on its capacity and integrate it effectively without creating more damage than benefit, So we have 85% of the participants who indicated using AI tool. 70% indicated a positive business impact after adopting AI. But for many of them, when they are mentioning AI, you notice it was mostly about generative AI tool like ChatGPT, Google Translate, DeepL, and Trados. And when it has to do with Trados and language technology platforms, very few have access to the licensed one. They mostly use either crack version or free tools like MateCat, but very few language professionals are using industry standard, probably because of the high cost for some of them since they are still growing. A third element that we noticed was the fact that the biggest growth opportunity in the industry currently is focused on African languages. Let me explain you why. Foreign languages, whether it is Spanish, French, English, already have advanced data set, terminology database, and many other elements. But African languages, especially those who are still underrepresented or under development, create more opportunities. But for these opportunities to be effectively leveraged, there needs to be a regulatory and policy environment to enforce, the use of those local languages. And we have organizations such as Masakane, Common Ground, who are also advocating a lot. And they are also building African language NLP resources, which previously were not existing. So basically, the greatest language opportunity is not French and English, but it is content in African languages. A fourth key insight is that the industry is mostly made up of micro businesses, so we found out that 77% operate at sole proprietorship, which means that 77% of language company are usually one solopreneur, if I can put it that way. And majority were forced to move to a company for the sake of having access to more opportunities. If they were able to do it like without registering, they would not have done it, because the volume of market is not that big, So most of those who have moved to sole proprietorship was because it gave them access to a credibility before clients. So 77% are in that case, and only 6% are operating as corporate entity, which means that what are the implications? The implication is that some conversation that we see in foreign markets like merging, acquisition, technology platforms are not happening frequently in Africa because of the size of these businesses, right? And Slator, which we all know as a language communication platform, has also been indicating that there are more and more potential that may come on the African market because of that. So that's a fourth factor. A fifth element is that client acquisition is a bigger challenge than translation itself. Business development is a core missing gap in the industry. You can easily find business developers who are in the language industry and who are in the hospitality industry, business development in finance, business developers in education. But when you come to the language industry, not many are trained on how to look for clients, on how to negotiate contracts for the industry. So getting market is tough. And many companies also, whether they are non-profits or businesses, don't really know how to go about it. So most of the time, when a company has a need for a translator or an interpreter, they will not think about going to a company. They will know if maybe there is a staff who can translate, and they will say, hey, can you translate this for us? If it doesn't know, then they will reach out to someone in their environment who might translate or accidentally be a freelance translator. So the need for education and training of professionals in the sales for language services in Africa is key. A sixth factor that the research indicates is that AFCTA may become the biggest growth engine for the language industry. Why? Because it provides access to a broader market, right? So through that, there are new possibilities that will be expanded for legal translation, trade documentation, localization, cross-border marketing, language training, website localization, and many others, right? So whether it is African businesses who are expanding to new market or international businesses who are coming on the local market, if the AfCFTA has existing policy, is going to create, not just a trade corridor, but a language corridor, which will also come with economic benefit for the industry. And the last insight, which everyone should remember, is that, it's more about AI. There is this risk that we might be more consumers than creator of language AI. As we are all familiar, most of the language data sets that are out there were trained on international foreign languages. So there is a need of creating more and more data sets, in local languages. And in Nigeria, we have Data Science Nigeria and many other organizations who are advocating and pushing to ensure that there are more and more, data sets that are more comprehensive in African languages. We also have the All African Language Lab, which is also doing a lot of great work. So I will conclude this fact-based element by saying that the next billion-dollar opportunity in our industry may not necessarily be translation, but it's going to be company who are able to own data, company who are able to own terminology asset, speech corpora, and AI training infrastructure. We are in the age where just providing a service is not enough. We need to provide an infrastructure to be able to leverage across the entire value chain, of the ecosystem. Yeah, thank you.
Well, for me, coming from from a research background, one of our biggest problems was obviously getting those responses coming in. And I found from the results that, like I said before, access to internet was a problem for a lot of the people. And if the respondents had a problem, accessing the internet, then what about the rest of the guys out there? The second issue was that our is what we had said. It's actually one of the limitations is that we had provided the survey in English, and it's not like most of Africa was colonized by the British anyway, but we could have had it in French, we could have had it in Portuguese, so that we can get more of a wider insight from any of the other languages, so that we can see where do they sit in terms of in terms of what we're looking for. And then there's that gap of the language space. The thing that I found most interesting is that a lot of the individuals had a very wide number of languages that they spoke, right? They're sitting there on 6 languages, and they're not specialized. They're not, focused on any one area. They're doing absolutely everything that they can to make money in the language space. So we're back to that argument of Christian. When are you going to specialize? When are you going to offer a value-added product, a value to your clientele? It's almost as though people say, let me jump onto an opportunity in the language space and make $2 so that I can survive. The other thing is that it does sound a lot like, even though it is a growing industry, but it does sound like a lot of like a lot of the language professionals are jumping onto an opportunity because it's there. I can speak French and English, therefore I'm going to jump in and do whatever French and English thing I can do it to make a little bit of money. And that dilutes the professionalism and a lot of the training and a lot of the requirements that go into becoming an expert in the language service. But beautifully as well, is that, like on the flip side, is that a lot of our professionals, a lot of the people who had responded were well trained. They had postgrads. Only 2 people said, I came out into the language space and all I have is a high school diploma. But the rest of them were sitting on degrees, masters, some of them were even PhDs in the language space, contributing towards contributing towards research, contributing towards education. So what I saw was, the other problem is that, like I said, it's very West. The majority of the respondents are very West African based. But we did get a sampling from Southern Africa, we got a sampling from North Africa, we got a sampling from East Africa. So we have a taste of everyone, but we don't really have a full enough picture. We do need to do the survey again so that we can see how many more responses we can get. We can see whether or not we should have it in different languages so we can get a different view. We can see whether or not we can reach more people. We can add on to, we have gap questions. One of the things we asked, we don't know is, okay, in Europe, the NIMSY report talks about the size of the language services based on how much they generate, with the largest income earner crossing $1 million, right, or $200 million in a multi-billion-dollar industry. And then Africa contributes about 45% of that. And that 45% is based on only East Africa and Egypt, or only West Africa and Egypt, or only South Africa and Egypt. So they don't even know okay, so if those 3 regions contribute $6 billion, what about the rest of the continent? So we can estimate a potential, but we need to know. So it's a question, it's a gap, and it's a question that we wanted to ask. But because a lot of the people are so props, a lot of them, we felt they would not be willing to tell us, my income is less than 100,000. And then answering or talking about what Christian had said there is no company that we can actually go to say, can you help us bring in business? That's what NIMSY does. Okay. A couple of years ago, I had actually asked, how can I get business into my business? Is there any professional out there that can help me? And that's how I came across NIMSY in the first place. But in order for me to be able to get a NIMSY assistance, I have to generate a certain income. At the time, we were very small. We never met that requirement. But at the time, they were saying, just turn over $100,000 in a year and we'll come in and we will help you, because our rate for assisting you at the time was $10,000. It was 10% of that $100,000. Which individual is generating $100,000? If you multiply that in Pula, that's 1.4 million Pula. So I, as a sole prop, can I generate 1.4 million Pula myself? That's the question that I'm asking. So is it that there is no marketing company that can cater to us, or is it that the marketing companies don't know enough about our market so that they can create a product that can help us, so that we can go out there and find the business, so that we can bring the business in? And what they do is a lot of automation, because if you look at their blogs, they will tell you, get on to HubSpot, create an automation using HubSpot. HubSpot has a cost. Are you able to afford HubSpot? Are you able to afford a website? Are you able to afford the monthly payments for Google, for example, if you want a Google domain? As a sole proprietor, are you able to afford the license? One of the questions we asked is, why don't you have a licensed app? And it said, we use the free one because it's affordable. It costs nothing. But the license to use, let's say, Trados is maybe $1,000 in a year. Did I generate $1,000 this year? I don't know. Can I afford to spend $1,000 on that tool every year? I don't know, because a lot of them are individuals. A lot of them are starting out. And then I had done a study before, and I saw that, okay, if you start out, you start with 5 jobs in a year, and the income of those 5 jobs is less than $250 per session, per day. Is that enough? So there's a lot of problems in terms of, can an individual build themselves to get to the point where they're worth reporting on a NIMSY report, or where they're worth reporting on any kind of a platform or a report? It's possible, it's feasible if they are a business. Can they create a business? Because a business has costs. Do they have the skills to create a business that has costs associated with them? Is there enough business? Yes, there's enough business. Can you get that business in the first place? We don't know. So it's funny. It's like a self-feeding machine that also eats on itself at the same time. I don't have the skills to get the clients. The clients are there. And in order for me to get the clients, I have to pay money. But in order for me to get money, I have to get the clients. And so I'm unable to do what I need to do to get by. So what we have to do is we have to use, I don't know, maybe the ALCA has this report, and we're trying to get people to become businesses, to register businesses. As a business member, you then join associations. Associations give you credibility, right? Speaking to that whole, can we verify who you are? So as an individual, join an association for individuals. As a business, join an association for a business, because the association for a business will vet you to say, in order for you to qualify to be a member, you have to meet certain criteria. They can then come back and ask and check, you know, what are you doing? How are you doing it? Do you have processes? Do you have systems? We can check. And then we can build, you know, developing African language, what you call this, African language systems into you. We can now maybe give you that training, or we can help you develop yourself so that you can become exportable. All of these are opportunities that are available to help these little businesses that we studied in day one to become the businesses we need them to be in order for us to be able to compete on a global scale, and for African businesses to achieve what we know they can achieve because of 2,500 languages at X price per word, multiplied by the number of words that get translated a year, which I think we estimated at 1.2 million for one company one time, is a lot of money. It's a lot of income, it's a lot of potential, and it's what we need to be able to tap into.
Okay.
Okay. Can I add some few elements? So
Okay.
Just
Briefly.
yes, so yeah, briefly. So in like as you indicated, the current stature or characteristics of majority of the language company on the continent make it hard to use the standard or criteria of NIMSI to define, you know, like top performing language company. And I believe it shows that there is a need of having, you know, African-based criteria to do that effectively, because the level of growth, the level of maturity of both industry, whether in Africa, Asia, Europe, or America, are not the same, you know. So that's something that could be envisaged. And same component also when it has to do with ISO certification. There are many African company, language company, who are not necessarily able to comply to all the ISO requirement as being stated by the international body, you know, because of the peculiarity of the market in which they are operating, the culture, and many other elements. So one of the elements that we basically found was that there is a need for Africa to also set its own path, or to create probably, you know, its own standard, which may be slightly different from what exists on the global marketplace.
Yeah, well said, Kristen. Well said. So yeah, the reports, I know you're very interested in seeing the reports. The reports will be distributed after this webinar. And of course, we welcome more questions. But we have a question on the chat box that would like Oumi or Kristen to take. We are actually out of time, but we want to take this particular question. What safeguards should be put in place to make sure digital inclusion does not come at the cost of language quality, linguistic dignity, and the fair treatment of the linguistics doing the work? So this is a very important question.
Yeah. So, Oumi, do you want to go first?
When it comes to fair treatment of linguists using, when it comes to the fair treatment, what we have to acknowledge and agree is that no linguist is actually going to be treated unfairly, for as long as we understand that the automation is literally just a tool to speed up how much work gets done, or how fast and how great work gets done. Okay, that's it. That's all it is. And in order for us to be able to feed that tool, we actually need humans to come in to perform the work in the background, do the research, and give those tools the rules, so that it's just supposed to make the work happen faster. The second thing is that we can put in regulations that you know, sort of help price that individual. We can actually say, you know, if you're going to hire a professional of a certain caliber, can you please make sure that you compensate them fairly? And in some European countries, they do actually put limitations on how much you are allowed to compensate someone in the language space for the work that they do. We do need to create regulations of that kind, and that could really help us, at least on the African continent. The third thing is that we tend to forget, a lot of people tend to forget, and they do this, and this is the reason why I work in Africa, working with Africans is a little bit difficult, is that they forget that it is a continent and not a country. And because they forget that it is a continent and not a country, they kind of go to Ghana and expect to get the same treatment in South Africa. It's not like that. It doesn't work like that. It's never worked like that. And it's not going to work like that unless we as a continent decide one African country. That's not feasible now, right? So the moment our buyers forget, just remember, it's a continent. You know, they're not going to try and expect us to do BRICS work, you know, or China work, where we have 2 billion workers available. We don't have 2 billion workers. We only have the workers that are in that country that can assist you. The moment we have that down packed, and as a continent, we really just have to tell people this is how it is. Then people will stop looking at Africa as one and start looking at it as the 54 states that it is, and understand that every state has its own laws and regulations. It has its own prices, and it has its own ways of working. And that should help in pushing for the fair treatment of linguists, because I can tell you now, what I pay a guy in South Africa is not what I'm going to pay a guy in Kenya, and what I pay a guy in Kenya is not what I'm going to pay a guy in Ghana. And the reasons are also because if I pay somebody in Ethiopia, 50% of the money goes to the taxman, so I have to add so that they get fair compensation. So there's so many things that we have to take into consideration. And that's the most important thing is, we're not a country, we're a continent. Regulations are different in every country. Forex will come into play. Can we please take that into consideration? Can we create policies that at least that talk about what is the bare minimum, or at least that regulate the compensation of language experts on the continent? And AI is a tool, it is not a replacement. You know this. If you listen to AI generated videos on YouTube, you'll know. You cannot replace a human.
Yes, and if I may add more to it, I think this is where the regulatory bodies for our languages are very, very important and should play a very strategic role. So as I read the question from Michelle, one element that came to mind was the role of ALCA, you know, the one of the regulatory body for majority of African languages, which I believe there is so much more work that needs to be done at the level of enforcement, because how do we penalize tech companies who are putting AI output there that are not truly reflecting the standard of African languages? If there is no penalization, if they are not a regulatory body to sanction, you know, and say, no, this should not pass, you know, it will be hard. For example, if I take the French language, we have l'Académie Française, or the French Academy, which basically regulates how French is being used, you know, the standard for the language and all of that. But in most of the time, we do not have such body for enforcing, mostly the enforcing aspect, because when it has to do with tech giants, they will always go for what is cheaper. And what is cheaper may not always be what is better. What is better or quality will usually take more time. They usually come at a higher cost because they will need to hire professional linguists, and this will involve higher costs for their projects, higher time, more time. But many are not willing to go through that, you know. So unless there is strong advocacy, you know, convening, bringing those major tech giants on the table and let them understand that language is just beyond a tool of communication. No, language represents an identity. Language represents a culture. Language represents a civilization. You cannot exist without a language. You know, language is one of the primary factors of identifying a culture. So unless this conversation happens and African policymakers, especially those who have expertise in languages, are able to champion this and be firm that there are some nonsense there are some practice that should not be accepted, you know, and present the consequences for company who are not complying. If this is not being done, the practice will still continue. Linguists will continue to be used as human in the loop with very low salary or low pay to do very like just to tick the box basically. But the quality of the output is not really there. And as far as it goes out on the public system or the public data, it just started to be widespread, and it negatively influenced the development and the preservation of those languages. So there is a high level advocacy that needs to be done by ALCA, you know, and even by African countries, the African Union, to ensure that African language are not just being used anyhow.
Well said. Christian, thank you so much. It's been an exciting conversation, and I know we'll want to discuss more, but we have run out of time. And but this conversation is just actually getting started. With the birth of this report, I'm sure we'll be having more of this conversation. And of course, for members of ALCA, these are conversations that would be frequent, with frequent conversations in the community. And we really do appreciate your time. We appreciate the questions that have come in, and we hope to see you at the annual conference that is coming up soon. And the link is on the message box. But of course, if you registered for this webinar, we'll definitely send you the membership link, and we are going to also send you, for those that are quite interested, to be speakers at the coming conference. So sadly we have to say goodbye. The report will also be sent to you, and like I said earlier on, we really want your feedback. We want to know how you're using this report, how insightful did you find this report. We want to get, if you want to challenge the report, we are very welcome for you to do that as well. So yeah, and we do appreciate the time. Thank you so much to our speakers. Thank you. Our speakers are the researchers of this report, and we want to say thank you for the incredible work. I went through the report, and it's really great. So thank you so much for this report. And if you're still with us, just give me your favorite emoji as we say goodbye. Bye. Thank you so much. See you at our next webinar or at the annual conference. Once again, my name is Shirley Grace Hart. Bye.